Leon Hartmann wasn't the kind of man people dared to look in the eye. Billionaire. CEO. The kind of man who lived on the top floor of the world and spoke only when he chose to. People didn't speak to Leon, they whispered around him. They feared him, admired him, envied him. But no one ever imagined they'd see him brought to his knees in public. It happened inside the most expensive restaurant in the city, a place where chandeliers glowed like captured stars and violins played softly in the background. Leon had come alone, escaping the chaos of a company falling apart after a scandal he didn't see coming. Lawsuits piling up, investors fleeing, partners turning their backs, and the media circling him like vultures over a dying kingdom. His empire, built from nothing but faith, grit, and sleepless nights, was being dragged toward the edge, and every headline felt like another shovel of dirt thrown onto him. The restaurant, L'Altitude, was a world built for people like him, people who didn't need menus because the staff already knew their preferences, people whose footsteps silenced entire rooms. Leon had been dining there for years, sometimes alone, sometimes with clients, but always with the aura of untouchable authority. Tonight, however, that authority clung to him weakly, like a coat too heavy for the shoulders carrying it. He sat by the large glass window overlooking the city, his city. The skyline glittered like a mosaic of burning stars, but to Leon, it felt dimmer than usual. For decades he had looked at this view and felt victorious. Tonight, it mocked him. He pressed a hand against his forehead, exhaling slowly as a violinist played a delicate melody across the room. The soft music usually soothed him. Tonight it scraped at his nerves. The waiter approached, young and nervous, his posture extra stiff because serving Leon Hartmann was something trainees practiced for weeks. But Leon didn't even lift his gaze. "Good evening, Mr. Hartmann. Would you like your usual?" Leon nodded faintly, offering just enough acknowledgement to dismiss further conversation. His throat felt tight. His skin burned with the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting too many battles on too many fronts. When the waiter left, Leon leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The chandeliers shimmered like constellations, expensive ones, but tonight he felt more like a man stuck under a storm cloud than under stars. He closed his eyes briefly and saw flashes of the chaos he'd escaped from that day, board members shouting, journalists hounding him outside his own building, lawyers throwing terms at him faster than his tired mind could process, Hartmann Industries under investigation. Massive internal fraud discovered. Is this the billionaire's downfall? The headlines echoed in his skull. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours in 3 days. Something inside him felt cracked, fragile, dangerously close to shattering. The waiter returned with his meal, a carefully prepared steak, grilled asparagus, and the signature caramel soufflé he always ordered. But Leon barely touched the food. He simply stared at it, as if eating felt wrong when everything inside him was collapsing. For the first time in his adult life, Leon felt completely alone. His phone buzzed on the table. He didn't look at it. He knew what it was: another email from legal, another bad update, another fire to put out. He shut the phone off entirely, feeling a rare wave of defiance wash over him. For once, he didn't want to be reachable. For once, he wanted the world to leave him alone. He finished 2 bites of steak before the exhaustion caught up to him again. He sighed and pushed the plate away. When the waiter returned with the bill, Leon barely glanced at it. He reached inside his coat and pulled out the black titanium card he had carried for years, a symbol of prestige, wealth, and authority. He slid it into the leather bill folder and handed it back. He didn't expect anything unusual. That card had never once failed him, but tonight, everything was different. Across the room, he saw the waiter stop at the payment machine. He watched the waiter slide the card once. Then again. Then slower. Leon's stomach tightened like a knot pulling inward. The waiter glanced toward him, uncertainty flickering across his face. Leon narrowed his eyes, a very subtle shift only people who knew him well could read. But in this restaurant, even the staff knew how to interpret his expressions. The waiter tried again. Then again. Leon inhaled deeply, trying to calm the feeling rising inside him, something he hadn't felt in decades. A panic. Finally, the waiter approached, his steps hesitant. He held the card carefully, like it had suddenly become fragile or cursed. "Sir," he said softly, "your card, it's been declined." The words were gentle but sharp enough to split the room open. A hush fell over the tables around him. Someone's fork stopped midair. A couple turned to stare. A group of finance executives sitting near the wine shelf glanced over with wide eyes. Leon blinked once. Then again, slower this time, that's impossible, he said, his voice low, steady, and terrifying in its calmness. Run it again. The waiter nodded quickly and turned back toward the machine. Leon drummed his fingers on the table, another rare sign of agitation. His mind raced. His accounts were frozen. His assets locked pending investigation. But he still believed, hoped that something, anything, might have slipped through. As the waiter returned, this time even paler. I'm terribly sorry, sir. It was declined again. A pulse pounded behind Leon's eyes. His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to hearing the word no, let alone in something as simple as paying a bill. His chest felt tight, as though the air in the room had thickened. The manager approached now, a tall man with slicked back hair and an expression tight with discomfort. Mr. Hartman, he said, bending slightly. Perhaps there's another method of payment you could try? Leon reached into his coat, searching for another card, but his fingers brushed against nothing. He had left the others in his office during the chaos. This was the only one he carried today. For the first time in years, Leon felt heat creeping up his neck. Embarrassment. A childish, humiliating burn that he didn't know how to handle. He was a man who commanded boardrooms with a single glare, yet here he sat, unable to pay for a meal. People were whispering now, but he couldn't make out their words. They sounded like echoes bouncing off marble, sharp, distant, overwhelming. He opened his mouth to explain, but what could he say? That he was under investigation? That his accounts were frozen? That a man worth billions couldn't pay for dinner? He felt something inside him begin to crack, thin but deep. But just as he lowered his gaze, too ashamed to look anyone in the eye, a small, unfamiliar voice cut through the heavy silence. I can pay for him. At first, Leon thought he had imagined it. The voice was soft, fragile, even. But then he noticed the shift around him. People weren't whispering anymore. They were staring at something, or rather, someone. He turned slowly. Beside him stood a little girl, 8 years old at most, with a tiny coin purse in her hand. Her hair was tucked behind her ears, her clothes worn and patched in places that revealed a life far from luxury. Her shoes were scuffed, her coat too big for her small frame, but her eyes were bright with sincerity. She stepped closer, lifting her chin bravely. I can pay, she said again. I have money. The manager froze. The waiter blinked in confusion. Someone in the back gasped. The contrast between the richest man in the room and the poorest child in it couldn't have been more dramatic. Leon stared at her, unable to find words. His throat tightened. She opened her coin purse with tiny fingers, revealing a handful of coins, nickels, dimes, a few wrinkled bills folded carefully. My mama says if someone is in trouble, you help them, she said quietly. Even if they look like they don't need help. Her innocence didn't just silence the room, it pierced it. Leon felt something break inside him, but it wasn't shame now. It was something deeper. Something raw. Something that had been buried under years of success, power, and isolation. He hadn't felt human in a long time, but this little girl, with her bravery and her handful of coins, had reminded him of what he had once been, a boy who needed help, who prayed for kindness, who understood the sting of not having enough. For the first time in years, Leon Hartman didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a man. And he felt his heart, cold for so long, begin to thaw in the warmth of a stranger's kindness.